Great. Welcome, everyone, to the Competency Benchmarking Tool. How do you measure up? Brought to us by Supply Chain Canada. Before we get started, I'd like to do the land acknowledgement. We recognize that Manitoba is on the treaty territories and ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe, Anishinaabe, Dakota Oyate, the Nesyu and the Nihi Thowak peoples. We acknowledge Manitoba is located on the homeland of the Red River Métis. We acknowledge northern Manitoba includes lands that were and are the ancestral lands of the Inuit. We respect the spirit and intent of treaties and treaty making and remain committed to working in partnership with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people in the spirit of truth, reconciliation, and collaboration. Today we have for you Dylan Bartlett, who's the president and CEO of Supply Chain Canada, their national office. He's going to talk about their competency benchmarking tool. Dylan, please take her away.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jeff. Thank you so much for having me. I should say too, I've been a little bit under the weather, so if I'm fighting back a cough, that's what you're seeing. So I'll try my best to not cough in everyone's ears throughout this entire thing. My name is Dylan. I'm the president and CEO of Supply Chain Canada, and we're super excited to be talking to you guys today about the competency benchmarking tool. So a little bit of a history from our point of view. Um, oh, sorry, you guys. This thing is jumping all over the place, all the way to the end. Sorry here. Fun times. Okay, so a little bit of a backstory. So in 2019, essentially Supply Chain Canada brought together a group of thought leaders, industry professionals, to try to just look at supply chain end to end, critical input with direction from a lot of senior executives. And kind of what this review panel did was leverage insights from industry leaders and thought leaders across the supply chain profession in Canada, and just to try to capture some of the changes in technology and the overall landscape. Collectively, as a group, this review committee essentially created the competencies of supply chain professionals that we kind of utilized to build this competency benchmarking tool. So this is kind of this is the first kind of measuring stick in this way of its kind in Canada. It was, like I said, it was built with the help of a lot of different people. And as a result of this kind of historic undertaking, we were able to say that this was designed by supply chain professionals for supply chain professionals. And so we've continued to be actively involved in the process. For employers, I think these competencies provide some much needed background. Again, a little bit of a measuring stick as far as where your team is at in this kind of the broader spectrum of national supply chain. I think it provides a kind of a clearly defined standard that you can kind of operate off of. But then I think also from an employee point of view, it helps you understand kind of where you're at in your career. I think it helps identify strengths that you may have, but I think it also helps you kind of tap into maybe some gaps and maybe some training that you might want to tap into or get access to. So now more than ever, I think our professional standards will determine the future of the industry. And I think guided by this report, our professional competencies continue to pave a clear path for our members for professional development and career advancement. And I think it's also helped attract new and vibrant talent to our profession. Now, that said, I think that this is one of the most underutilized tools that we have. And so we're super excited to continue to spread the word about this. I think in our second edition of this kind of tool, we focused a little bit more on some very specific kind of parts of supply chain, which we think will help kind of better the industry as a whole. So again, I think employers can use this as a guide to help support their hiring process. And I also think that if you're a supply chain professional, you can absolutely tap into this to kind of determine what your continuing education could be. And then, of course, if you're new to supply chain, if you're curious about whether or not you should get into supply chain, I think this could help guide maybe what your future studies or what your future development could be as well. So there's a lot of things about the benchmarking tool that we're really excited about. And I think it's as we kind of work our way through the process, there's quite a bit of kind of elements of this that we hope to shine a bigger light on and get more exposure on. Certainly when it comes to like policymakers in government, we hope that eventually we can get to a place where we partner with some government agencies to again help maybe use this tool to help guide some of their future decisions in the supply chain industry in across the country. So that's a little bit of kind of how we got started with this, and then we started out with the competency framework. So again, this framework was designed by business and academic leaders. The competencies are forward looking, so they aim to kind of prepare people for the practice of supply chain management in the future. They're not a simple statement. There's more to this. There's quite a bit of robust kind of data and research that went into all these. And so, as we all know, supply chain is a complex system made up of a lot of people and processes and technologies. It's essentially engineered and managed to deliver value to everyone who's involved. Supply chain management covers all aspects of the product motion from the suppliers, customers, you name it, everything from the production of products to the shipping and receiving of goods. And so supply chain in and of itself is a daily function that happens across the country, and really is something that keeps our economy moving forward. And so we really feel like this tool is going to help identify some of these different categories, the functional competencies, the integrative competencies, and obviously the foundational stuff. And that's kind of how we start with our education programs. For anybody who is unaware of this, we are the national accreditors of the SCMP designation. So anybody in Canada who has the SCMP designation, which is the gold standard of supply chain in Canada, would have gone through our training program, done our leadership residency, and taken our final exam. They would have also needed to maintain their designation through continuous professional development. So, and like, obviously there's lots of change coming. Supply chain is forever evolving, and so this is something that I think we're kind of consciously aware of. There's been considerable change and increased complexity for supply chain practitioners across the country. I think us releasing this publicly was a really kind of important next step for us to say, well, you know what, hey, like let's try to create a benchmark for the benchmark, like let's try to get as many people as we possibly can to work their way through the benchmarking tool so that we can really start to create a baseline for training and education in supply chain across the entire country. And so that's kind of what we hope to do with this. And then, yes, from a foundational attributes point of view, we focus on a few different things. So, of course, we've got your ability to adapt. Anybody who has had a career in supply chain or is just getting started in supply chain will understand that some of these things are a kind of a daily function. And so the foundational attributes focus on the individual who takes on a supply chain management role. It focuses on their specific roles and responsibilities in their job every single day. And so the foundational attributes can be viewed as essential qualities. These are things that you essentially must have to be successful in supply chain, and that's why they're called foundational. So while that we try to convey these to aspiring supply chain management professionals, these are, I think, are valued and valuable in a lot of different industries. But these competencies were kind of what we established as kind of a baseline to say, okay, from an education or from a training point of view, we need to make sure that you have these skills before we start to move on to something that is a little bit more integrative and that focuses a little bit more on the strategy behind supply chain. So foundationally, these are all really important attributes that you need to have, and we explore all of these in the benchmarking tool. Then yes, from an integrative competencies point of view, this is where we start to get to be a little bit more high level. So we focus more on the strategic management activities of an organization over time. These competencies, they kind of work to more align you with the future of supply chain, environmental, political, structural, technological issues that may come up, any kind of tasks that happen within your organization that require more thought than just kind of the foundational side of things. And so again, I think, as we work through the process and you kind of start to measure yourself, I should say too, and maybe this is something I should have said at the beginning. There's a scenario I think where you work your way through the competency benchmarking tool. I think the most critical part of the benchmarking tool, because it's a self-assessment, I think the most important part of it is that you're honest with yourself. The only way that you're really going to be able to get the most out of this is if you're really honest about where your skill set is at any given period of time. And this is something that you can take and retake this benchmarking tool every 6 months, every year, as you kind of get more education and get more experience. You can continually kind of come back to this to kind of reassess yourself and measure your progress again and again, which is really powerful. And so, yeah, so some of the things we focus on in kind of this middle ground, the integrative competencies, are things like supply chain strategy, supply chain design, the process flow, the start to finish of supply chain. And then obviously analytics are a huge part of what we're doing here. The data can be really, really powerful when you start to dig into very specific supply chain competencies in this space. And so, these are kind of, I think, outside of the foundational ones, this is kind of the situation where you really start to provide and add value to your respective organization. I think when you're living in this space of strategy and you're starting to be really forward thinking about it, I think that really puts you in a place where you can, again, I think, start to really make structural improvements to supply chain at your organization. And so we try to measure these as kind of that middle of the pyramid. And then, yes, of course, from the integrative side of things, we jump into the functional competencies. And so these are kind of high level concepts with a lot of moving parts in them. So from a functional competencies point of view, we're trying to focus on things like just consistent performance. Performance of your overall supply chain, all of the activities within your organization that fall underneath that supply chain umbrella. And so, when we start to look at these competencies that are on the screen right now, somebody who works in supply chain in Canada, they might choose to have a very specific focus of expertise. And so, like for me, as an example, I have quite a bit of warehousing and kind of facilities management background. And so that was kind of a place where I kind of found a little bit of a niche and really got interested in it. And so when measuring myself, I might score very highly in warehouse and facilities management, but maybe in operations planning and control, maybe I wouldn't score quite as high. And again, that's a function of making sure that you're honest with yourself as you kind of work through the process, right? But what's nice about this is you might say, as part of this process, you might find that, okay, you know what? I'm really competent and I'm excelling in this one category. That might be an opportunity for you to go even further down that path and become a bigger expert in that specific category. Or it might cause you to have some level of pause and say, you know what, maybe I want to get a little bit more of a well-rounded skill set. So why don't I take a step back from kind of where I'm going now and start to get some education and some training in some areas where maybe I've identified some gaps. And so it really is, it's a great opportunity as an individual to just continually revisit the benchmarking tool. And like I said, just get a real-time example of kind of where you are at from a knowledge base point of view, and then be able to adapt to that and adjust accordingly as far as where you want to go next in your career. I should say too, these are all things that we can help you with at Supply Chain Canada. And so something we take a lot of pride in this space is if you need something custom, if you've got a specific kind of training that you want to do, we kind of use this as a little bit of a roadmap to kind of determine what that training could and should look like, right? And so when you go through the benchmarking tool, you could absolutely reach out to us and say, hey, here are some gaps that I identified. What would be the best course of action for me? What would be the best training for me to tap into, or maybe a more robust kind of education program? But there's lots of opportunities to partner with us in this space. And I think that's really kind of a critical piece of this. So those are kind of the three levels of the competencies that we measure. This is a robust thing. to be candid, I mean, there's quite a bit to this, right? And so, yeah, on a really basic level, you have the ability to get a really extensive look at kind of where you're at in your supply chain journey. And so we're going to share some additional information after this. We're going to send an email out to everybody with some links and some additional information about how you can access this and what kind of the next steps are. But generally speaking, yeah, it can help identify your strengths, help analyze some gaps in your skills, and then I think just find out where you stand in the supply chain industry. And I do think that it could help you kind of guide that next decision as far as where you want to go and grow in your career from here. And so who can access the CBT? Well, listen, the short answer is everybody can. It's great for individuals and it's great for organizations. And so, when you're an individual who's accessing it, the CBT sets out more than 400 individual competencies. So it's incredibly robust, right? Again, all of these have been carefully chosen to represent the different facets of supply chain, right? To make up the complete supply chain professional. So we sorted these into categories from tactical to managerial. And I think when you go through the CBT, you'll find that it articulates some of the specializations that individuals can pursue. And that's kind of what I was alluding to before. You might want to just go all into one category and really focus your education around that. Or if you're looking for a more well-rounded approach, that's absolutely an option as well, right? And then, yes, from an organizational point of view, and this is something that we're just kind of starting to tap into now on a larger scale, and we're really excited about this. We're actually partnering with organizations across the country right now with large supply chain departments. And what we're encouraging them to do is just put all of their supply chain professionals through the CBT. Get a baseline for everybody. And then what's nice from our point of view at Supply Chain Canada is we'll sit down and we'll say, okay, well, based on your 10 employees and where they kind of ranked in the CBT, we can then make custom training solutions where each individual person gets a unique set of training, a unique kind of educational profile where we can make it so that 10 people, 10 different experiences, 10 different skill levels, different strengths and different gaps that we've identified throughout the process. And then we can kind of custom make training for each one of them individually, as opposed to having everybody go through the exact same training. This is much more cost effective. It's much more budget friendly. And I think employees really respond way better to it because they feel like, and they're true in feeling like this, they feel like they're getting a more tailored approach, something that's very specific and unique to them. So we kind of are able to cut through some of the redundancies and not have such repetition in the training. We're really just kind of focused on the areas in which you want to grow. So I think benefits for everybody here. Like I said, definitely worth doing, whether you're on the education side of things or if you're an individual who's just kind of working your way through your supply chain journey. I know for me, I kind of fell into supply chain. The first job that I ever had was driving a forklift. I don't even think I even realized I was working in supply chain at that time. But as things progress, you do start to get a feel for maybe avenues that you really love versus some areas that maybe you maybe want to steer clear of, depending on what your interests are or what your specific skill set is. I personally have worked in quite a wide variety of supply chain roles, and I have found all of them to be rewarding and all of them to be really educational, and I've learned a lot, great experience. But I definitely have a few that I feel I'm stronger at, and probably, if I'm honest with myself, probably a few that I enjoyed more than others. And so I think that kind of comes down to that personal preference piece and how you want to kind of own and manage your own career, but opportunities for everyone here. So I would encourage everyone to use this as individuals, absolutely. But if you work for an organization and you would like to have them kind of work through this assessment, you could absolutely have them reach out to us, and we'll be happy to facilitate that. Oh, yeah, so these are just kind of some really quick screenshots just to get a feel for kind of how the system flows. So when you log into the competency benchmarking tool, again, you're going to go through a kind of a wide range of questions, right? It's just over 100 questions. It only takes about 20 minutes to complete the entire thing. So it's not a crazy amount of commitment from that point of view. But so generally speaking, what you'll have is you'll work through kind of the three competencies that we discussed in this webinar. And And then you'll be able to rank how often or how frequently you use each one of those skills. And as you rank them and as you kind of work through the process, and again, be honest with yourself. It's okay, right? It's okay if you feel like maybe there's a gap in your expertise. That's not a bad thing. Everybody has somewhere where there's a gap. But as you kind of work through the process, you'll be left with some reporting that kind of looks like this. And so what's nice about this is it shows you a little bit of a baseline. It shows you where you rank, but it also shows you kind of your self-rating, comparably speaking to you could do the industry, you could do your coworkers, but at the end of it all, you get a pretty robust report that kind of highlights exactly where maybe some gaps are and maybe you need to kind of focus on some training in those specific areas. Which again is it's an incredible report to have because it offers insight into your knowledge base that most people just don't have access to. I will say too, we're about to kind of wrap up the presentation side of things. I think we've got a Q&A portal open. So anybody who has a question or anything like that, please feel free to ask your questions. I'm happy to answer as many questions as we possibly can here as we kind of work through this. So. And then, yes, so I think what's nice about this is when you get the results, you can actually review your past assessments and compare your past assessments. So if you decided you were going to schedule this on a cadence of every 6 months or once a year, you'll be able to kind of track your progress, comparatively speaking, as you kind of work through that. I would just recommend setting just a really quick reminder on your phone, 6 months or a year out, say, oh, I should go back and I should revisit the benchmarking tool again and see what kind of progress that I've made. So, does anybody have any questions?
I do have a couple questions here.
Perfect.
So, does Supply Chain Canada offer trained resources online?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, we do. And so like I said, it's actually kind of the timing is interesting from the point of view that we're kind of looking at our education program and wanting to kind of make some tweaks and some changes to it. But yes, generally speaking, we offer online. If you have something specific that you'd like to take, whether it's an individual or a small group or a big group, we can more often than not accommodate that. Absolutely.
Okay. And then are they free or do you need to join Supply Chain
Uh,
Canada?
no, I mean, ideally, the best course of action for everybody, the best way to get access to the most amount of things and the best way to get the best rates on everything is to become a member. So to be candid, we're always encouraging people to become a member. There's a ton of benefits outside of the competency benchmarking tool. There's a ton of benefits to being a member. So of course, we would love to encourage everybody to come and be a member. Outside of that, yeah, I mean, we have some free webinars. Generally speaking, there will be a cost associated with training and education, but the benchmarking tool is completely free. Yeah, you can access the benchmarking tool at any time, and there's no cost associated with it at all.
That's all I see for questions so far.
Okay, perfect. Maybe I could stop screen sharing and just open it up for discussion. If there's anybody who wants to, you don't have to use the chat. You can just turn your mic on and just ask me some questions if you got them.
So if anybody in the audience has anything that they'd like to raise their hand, I could unmute you then at that point as well.
Come on, you guys, ask some questions. I would love to answer some questions.
Well, you were very thorough, so it's
Well, like I will say this, outside of the questions or if there's no questions, it's all good here today. That's no problem at all. Like we will be sending out some additional information about this. Like I said, we will send out a few links to the benchmarking tool with a little bit of kind of a how to use it and kind of the benefits of it. So we'll email that out to everybody who's on the call today. That's no problem at all. We'll also send out a link to the most recent issue of our supply chain magazine. And the reason why I say that is because there's a really interesting article in there that is about the benchmarking tool, where we were interviewed and we answered a whole pile of questions about it. And so that might also kind of give you some additional context and kind of feedback on it. But bottom line is we would love to have everybody participate in the benchmarking tool. And we hope that when we send the link out to everybody, that you choose to take part in it, at least see where you rank. It's a really interesting process that I hope you'll take advantage of. And again, it is free, so please do.
Yeah, myself and my colleagues took the test, and it was very interesting. And and yeah, there's like you say, Dylan, you need to be honest with yourself. And like for me, there was a bunch of stuff I had a decent feeling of expertise from my past career. And then there's stuff it's like, well, I've never done that. So it's like 0, 0, 1, 1, and that's all, it's all good because
It
you're just
is,
being
yeah.
honest with yourself and you're saying, well, here's where I'm strong, here's where I'm weaker. And therefore you kind of know what things to focus on in terms of the education. And I guess in terms of when people get the link, they can go to do they follow the link and then they can email you folks to get, because it's going to be set up for each company, right? In
Yeah,
terms
yeah,
of
it
how to get
is.
access.
Yeah, it is. And so if you want to register with a group, absolutely. Like if you've got a few colleagues who you think you all want to kind of go through it together, then yeah, there's some contact information there. You can reach out to us and we can facilitate that absolutely. If you're just wanting to fill it out as an individual, same rules apply. Like I said, we'll send out the link. You can access the self-assessment, no problem. And then of course, we're always available should you have any additional questions or concerns about it. We can field anything. Like I think that the nice thing about it, Jeff, and I really appreciate your feedback because we had a blast taking your group through it for sure. I mean, I think especially when not all supply chain professionals, which is kind of interesting, right? Um,
Yeah,
I think in that set of circumstances, what we really learned from that process, which was really really great, is when you start to compare data in a group of people, that's really where it becomes really powerful. Because I think employers are surprised by how often they identify skills that they didn't know their employees had,
yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Whereas you're right, I think more often than not, the employees actually are kind of familiar with what their strengths and where their gaps are. And so certainly there's always some aha moments, there's always some eye openers in there, but generally speaking, if you're honest with yourself, you really will get a really great jumping off point for your career, and it will kind of help you make that next decision.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely. And I guess back to the training kind of thing. And so becoming so let's say a company did this, they want to get into the supply chain management end of things. They see that maybe they have a little bit of talent internally, and we're maybe not quite ready to hire a professional to do this full time. We're maybe not quite there yet in terms of sales or our needs, or so they might almost be like one, like the owner in terms of other duties as assigned.
Yeah.
But insofar as becoming a member for a small organization, let's say 5 employees, or like, is your membership cost based on size of
No.
like FTEs or sales or?
No, it's based on the individual and it's based on geographically where you are across the country. So no, we have some corporate rates, some group rates. If you have a large group of people in an organization that would like
Sure.
to all be members together, of course we would work with those groups and kind of try to accommodate that. But
Sure.
generally speaking, no, I mean it's, a couple $100 a year, depending on where you are in the country. And like I
Yeah.
said, there's a massive amount of benefit to being a member, right? Even outside of the benchmarking tool. And so I would highly recommend if you work in supply chain or would like to work in supply chain or work adjacent to supply chain, I do think there's a massive amount of benefit to being a member. So
Sure.
that's the place I would start for sure. Yeah. I mean, if when you're a member, you get access to a lot of networking opportunities and educational content and webinars. And like I said, it's the largest network of supply chain professionals in the country, some of the most influential supply chain professionals in the country. And I do think being a member is a really interesting way to kind of fast track your career and meet the right people and have the right conversations. And so, yeah, I highly recommend that. Absolutely.
Okay, well, that sounds great. Now there's also a provincial organization, because we've got Rick Reed
We do,
here
yes.
today, who's, I guess, where he wears two hats because he's a Supply Chain Canada person, and he's also the leader of Supply Chain Manitoba.
Absolutely, yeah.
So in terms of like again, becoming a member, does
Mhm.
one become a member of the provincial
Yeah.
organization or? as well as the national, or?
Yeah, exactly. Everyone who's a member across, we have over 4,000 members across the country, and
Wow.
every member that we have across the country is a member of national and of their respective institute. And so, yeah, just really quickly, I can just kind of say from a
Okay.
structure point of view,
Yeah.
we've got national, the National Association, and then we have institute partners all across the country. So we have representation in every province and territory in Canada. Rick and his group are fantastic, and they monitor and maintain the members in both Manitoba and Ontario, which is represents our central Supply Chain Canada location. And so
Sure.
yeah, if you're in Manitoba as an example and you become a member, you're a member of national and you're also a member of your provincial, your regional institute. So in this case, yes, you'd be a member of Rick's Institute in Manitoba. And so Rick and his team, they offer education, direct to member services, networking opportunities, all locally in their region. Yeah, so you do benefit from kind of a national approach, but also a lot of exposure at a regional level as well.
Okay.
And that's
It
true.
almost
That's true
sounds like a
for.
great way to, maybe, if if you were looking for someone, maybe might be a great channel to recruit versus
Oh yeah.
just running an ad. And I expect maybe there'd be some guidance or assistance if you wanted, in terms of, well, what do I ask them, what do I looking for,
Yeah.
etc. So
Yeah, absolutely. So on one hand, we actually can facilitate job postings. So if you were in Manitoba and you reached out to Rick and his team, they could facilitate posting a job posting on our job board and on our social media to reach our network directly. So
sure.
that's always an option. But generally speaking, Jeff, you're totally right. Like one thing we're doing in 2025 is we're partnering with as many like HR related associations as possible, and we're trying to encourage these HR professionals to request things like our SMT and our SCMP designation in their job in their hiring
Sure.
process, right? In their job postings. So
Yeah,
so obviously it's mutually beneficial. We can make it so that they get a professional that we know has taken the absolute gold standard of supply chain training in Canada. But then on top of that, we also kind of it goes both ways, right? We benefit from that as well, as far as them kind of highlighting and focusing on the SCMP designation as an example. So yeah,
absolutely.
that's something we aim to do more and more of that this year. Absolutely.
Okay, well, that's very interesting.
Yeah,
Well, it sounds great.
very cool. Well, thanks so much for having me, you guys. Are there any other questions?
There is no other questions that have come in.
Perfect.
Mhm.
Well, I'm easy to get a hold of. If you'd like to connect with me on LinkedIn, I'm the guy who looks like this, whose name is Dylan Bartlett. I'm pretty easy to find on there. And so just in general, like I said, if you work in supply chain, if you're looking for support, if you want somebody who can kind of help advocate for you and be a part of your kind of career progression, reach out to us. We would love to assist in any way possible. We're happy to be a resource in a variety of different ways. And so yeah, if you think of any follow-up questions, we'll send out my contact information here as kind of part of our post-webinar package. And if you need anything else, please reach out. We'd love to hear from you.
Sounds great, Dylan. We really appreciate you taking the time today and talking about the CBT with us and the extra discussion. And it's great to learn about your organization, and yeah, there's a lot of value there I can see to our clients. And
Thanks, Jeff. I really appreciate that.
yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So we're gonna dive even more into the topic of supply chain next week on what is it, Tuesday, January 28th. We're going to do an in-person focus group. So, and it's going to be focused on our sector, so food and beverage, agri-food. And really what we want to do is to give people an opportunity to discuss any issues they're having. Maybe there'll be some ideas coming out of this. Maybe there'll be some brainstorming. We've also invited people in the warehousing, distribution, and fulfillment ends of things, transportation end of things, and give people a chance to network with those kind of professionals and maybe learn some best practices. So the in-person session is going to be in Headingley the morning of Tuesday, January 28th. And if you can't make that one, or if you'd like to make that one as well as the virtual one, it'll be the following day on Wednesday, January 29th. Both are going to run from 9:30 to noon. And if you want to pop us a note for information, we've also been hammering people with emails about this. So So I think that's it. Thanks again, Dylan. Thanks again, everybody, for attending, and you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks so much for having me. Take care, guys.